Hello, everyone. Welcome to Functionally Enlightened. Today, we're going to be talking to Jodi Scott, who's the CEO and founder of Green Goo. She's a seasoned visionary in health and wellness with over 2 decades of experience. Armed with a master's degree in health psychology and a background in pre-med, she specializes in psychoneuroimmunology, exploring the mind-body connection and the power of medicinal plants, which is awesome. I'm so excited to speak with her today. Under her leadership, Sierra Sage Herbs has thrived, birthing multiple renowned brands, including Green Goo First Aid, Southern Butter Intimates, and the innovative Good Goo CBD line. Their mission centers on plant-based product development, guided by a unique full-spectrum lipid extraction process. Jodi's pioneering spirit is propelling the health and wellness industry toward a more holistic future, and it's marked by her passion, innovation, and global impacts. Jodi, again, we're so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for taking some of your time out.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Absolutely. So you have a very diverse background. I'm really interested in this is not a field that we're all very familiar with. So psychoneuroimmunology. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in this field in health psychology and alternative medicine?
Absolutely. So, yes, I have a master's in health psychology that was sort of prompted a double major in psychology and biology and being pre-med. And I actually was in the first health psychology graduate program in the US. And my goal there was really to change how we looked at medicine. And so I was training resident physicians in the biopsychosocial model, which was really more rather than just meeting the patient, taking it, getting an intake and then prescribing them a medication, really getting to know the patient, get to know what could be interfering with their, maximizing the results of this, medication or intervention. Think about their diet, their community, their habits. And then that way you could potentially say, hey, yes, I'm giving you this diabetic medication, but I also want to give you this leaflet on nutrition. And it seems, obvious to us now. But when we started this journey, integrative and holistic medicine was just a very, very small part of, the way we approached medicine. And then, my passion for psychoneuroimmunology was really looking at how our mind and our body affects our immune system and our overall health and wellness. And what we know of that today is just that mindfulness and there are different practices, prayer, meditation, and so forth that can influence our ability to stay healthy and heal ourselves in so few words, but while also being aware of outside things that can come in and impact our overall health and wellness. And that really was sort of the groundwork for my mom, sister, and I starting Green Goo. My sister is an herbalist and a midwife, and really looking at the health and wellness space and how certain chemicals may not be good for us, specifically in the first aid space. And that's really where Green Goo was born.
But can you talk a little bit about the process, or actually the thought process, to developing Green Goo? And also, well, we'll touch up on this first before I want to go into the medicinal part of things.
You got it. So it was so interesting, being passionate about clean ingredients and sustainability. And, here we had like natural shampoo and we were eating organic foods and, we had compostable garbage bags and something we recognized as that we were willing to make an exception in our first aid kit. Our first aid closet had all the chemicals and all the one-time use products and lots of tubes that we were throwing away in the landfill. And what I recognized is that we weren't alone. A lot of my natural friends were also making the exception. And we started to see a trend that the natural consumer was willing to abandon their natural ethos because they were told products like Neosporin, hydrocortisone, Calamine were the only products that could get the job done. And then the conventional consumer, which was very interesting, was that they didn't care what the ingredients were. They were disappointed in the efficacy and they found it, inconvenient, but also poor performance, which then led to them going to a physician because most people are suffering from chronic skin conditions. And the OTC first aid category really only accommodates to acute skin conditions. So it's like use this product for 3 to 5 days, discontinue if symptoms persist, because it can cause, liver damage or what have you, and go see your physician. And so we recognized that there was an opportunity to change this. And we said, can we make a first aid plant-based brand that is superior in efficacy? And oh, by the way, it's also natural. And we also have sustainable packaging and bring in a little playfulness to it. Hence, the name Green Goo, which is really fun. And so that's how it was born. And we really looked at each of those products in that space to get a better understanding of, what skin conditions people were most concerned with and say, can we do better?
Is this a product that would be applied to wound care, for instance? Or can you tell us exactly what type of
Absolutely.
disorders would be treated best?
So our hero product is our Green Goo First Aid. And this was meant initially to be a natural alternative to Neosporin. What we found was about 25% of the population has an allergy to neomycin. It's toxic to pets, and there's a lot of antibiotic resistance. In doing so, as a topical antiseptic, we also recognized that people are looking for pain relief. They're looking for something to take the sting out, something to take the itch out, perhaps slow down the bleeding. And so we decided to make our Green Goo First Aid not only your topical antibiotic antiseptic, but make it your first aid kit on the go. So for the first time, you could have your first aid kit in your pocket, in your purse, in your backpack, in your baby bag, everywhere you go. So it slows down the bleeding, speeds up the healing, takes the sting and the itch out, and it's safe for pets. And what you'll find, blisters, chafing, sunburn, along with your cuts and scrapes and your bee stings and so on. It's my dad's retired military, and this was one of our first products. And so he used to take it out on his deployments.
Hmm.
And it was really interesting because a lot of his friends were like, they started taking it with them as well, because they're going into remote locations and very harsh weather conditions and for long hours. So they're getting blisters, they're getting sunburnt, they're getting chapped, lips, all the things. And they could take their little Green Goo tin with them, and it was portable. And, a lot of these things weren't things that were dangerous for them in terms of, better stated, a cut wasn't going to take them to the emergency room, but it was uncomfortable. And so they had something that could accommodate, where instead they would have just been really uncomfortable for long hours.
Right. And you use the word natural ingredients. When we see the label natural, sometimes it doesn't really say that everything is organic. There's a difference, or that natural could still have some form of synthetics based on the processing. So can you tell us about the ingredients that you use with these, and then how we can feel comfortable knowing that it could be used for all ages, including infants?
You're spot on. There's a lot of greenwashing that's out there. My daughter has an app that she uses to try to teach her how to navigate marketing and ingredients, because a lot of brands can look like they're natural and then there's zero natural ingredients. What's unique to Green Goo is not only the ingredients, but it is the process. And to your point, I think natural in the past has been extracts and sort of modeling the industrial revolution formulations. So still have things like alcohol and phthalates and parabens, but they might have, a calendula extract in it that has some natural components. What's different about Green Goo is we make the ingredients. So you can't get these ingredients anywhere else. So we bring the plants to our manufacturing facility, where we take it through this unique extraction process. We yield high amounts of the medicinal properties, and then these custom oils go in all of the products. So you can't get not only these kinds of oils blended in that way, but the concentration. And so these unique blends then go into all of the products with plant-based oils. And the plant-based oils are the carriers. And I say that's important because most products out there are made with petroleum or parabens. And a lot of that just sits on the surface of your skin. And when you have a plant-based oil as the carrier to these high concentration of medicinal properties, you actually can absorb it and your body likes it. And that's why you get the results that you do. And then the packaging is important as well. So phthalates are endocrine disruptors and can really, they're finding more and more evidence on how they may be contributing to some of the diseases that we're experiencing. And phthalates is the number one chemical produced on the planet. The US produces 1 billion pounds of phthalates alone per year. It's extraordinary. And so, part of why we have the tins, as an alternative to tubes is for that reason. It's better for the environment, but we're also reducing our phthalate exposure.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that the materials they can all be recycled as well.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. So with some of our audience, they might not be familiar with the potential impacts of using products with the phthalates and parabens, as you mentioned. We know that they're endocrine disruptors. Can you expand a little bit on that to enlighten our audience because they're curious to know what exactly these chemicals are?
So endocrine disruptors are going to mess up and interact with our hormones, which are then going to interact with our homeostasis. And, for men and women, that can have different impacts. And it can also further stress the body out. So, in terms of your homeostasis. And, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, it's not necessarily, if you just have to choose how to live, it might not be as important as to what you eat as important as it is to what you avoid. You might not always be able to eat the best ingredients, but if you can avoid some of the other ones that are harsher on your body, because this is your one vehicle, this is the one body, and it's trying to do its job. And when you bring in these other disrupting chemicals and there's when you look at endocrine disruptors, there's a lot of science behind whether or not that's what causes cancer, different issues with our hormones, whether it's menopause or early menstruation and memory. And so, and yes, I'm like, I go on and on. And it is, I mean, your hormones are there to help balance your body.
Mhm.
And so, phthalates disrupt that more in that sense. Parabens were more of associated with making your product not go rancid. We'll call it that. It was something, it was a stabilizer. We have a lot of natural ingredients like vitamin E, rosemary, lavender. Those ingredients, not only do they serve us well because they, have a calming effect or they have antioxidant properties, but they actually also serve the product well for keeping the product stable. So you don't need things like parabens in order to keep your product stable. And you know what? We've now got technology and a great transportation system. Parabens were a wonderful thing when the Industrial Revolution came and we wanted to get products to people's homes and it took months before it got there. We don't have that now. We did, and really, when you think about the lifespan of some of these chemicals that are being introduced into our lives now, they haven't been around for long. They've been around for, less than 100 years versus these plants that we've lived with for a very long time.
And that's a good point you bring up because with these chemicals, there's not too many that are banned in the United States, but with these chemicals, we've seen an uptick in chronic illnesses. And so a lot of our listeners may have been using products at home, whether it be the cookware or personal care products, even fragrances in the home. So it's good to see products like yours being developed. And I know you have additional products that are catered more towards like the psychological or mental well-being. Can you talk a little bit on those?
So what we do when we first started formulating, my sister and I, we had a couple really important points, right? We wanted to make sure that our efficacy was superior in the symptom relief that we were looking for. So if it was wound care, eczema, pain relief. And then in addition to that, we wanted sustainability and clean ingredients. But then to add to that, my sister's also an Ayurvedic practitioner. And so we started to get to know how these ingredients can have a mind-body relationship. And we said, well, let's take this a level further. So, for example, our Southern Better line is our intimate line. And we brought in essential oils that are very specific to calming your mind or, waking you up. Same thing with our deodorant. We have essential oils and plants in there that are very much designed for like mind clarity, in addition to calming or improving your immune system. We have a free to breathe product that has like Ravensara oil, and that is intended to be an antiviral, but it also in conjunction has a calming effect. Eucalyptus, peppermint, lavender, sandalwood, cinnamon, there's all these beautiful essential oils that can impact your homeostasis and also a desired mental state, whether it is you want to become more alert or you want to be calmer. And it's really fun to bring that into the products that are designed for wound care. So, for example, our free to breathe product is a Vicks vapor alternative. And what we found is that, yes, people were buying this for colds and coughs, but there's this like old tale that if you put it underneath your feet, it somehow improves your immune system or helps you sleep better. And yet there are no sleep properties in this product, in Vicks, and there is no immune booster to it. It just has some menthol and petroleum. And so we said, well, let's serve the customer. Let's give them what they're looking for. So we added, the Ravensara, which has the antiviral component, but then we added, eucalyptus, peppermint, both having calming effects that also do open up your airway, lavender oil in there to help you sleep. And I actually put this under my feet now every night before I go to bed. And I promise you, I sleep better. I'm like,
Amazing.
it's pretty great.
That's something I would like to try. I know I'm Puerto Rican, and in Puerto Rico, Vicks is like the go-to. So when you said Vicks on the feet, I was laughing because that's something that we've done. Put it on the feet, put the socks on, and it should help you sleep deeper. But yeah, I guess in hindsight, I didn't really notice any improvement in sleep. So it's good to know.
Well, and it probably started from a product that really was pure, that had those properties, and then it converted into, a commercial product that didn't. So, I'm just bringing back the roots of.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that there's other alternative meds that you've been researching, like psilocybin. If you can talk a little bit about this, I know maybe some of our audience has already heard of it or they dabbled in it. I know there's quite a few people that are going with ketamine treatment, but I know there's so many different modalities. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
The psychedelic renaissance is fascinating to me, for so many reasons. Obviously, having a background in health psychology and psychoneuroimmunology, looking at plant-based alternative modalities, and obviously psychedelics is sort of a marriage of all of those, right? And, we're seeing improvement in people with stage 4 breast cancer, chronic pain, phantom limb, treatment-resistant PTSD, where we weren't getting those results. You oftentimes felt like you were going 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. And for example, we have a clinical trial that is looking at treatment-resistant PTSD, and they come with not just, suicidal thoughts and major depression. They're overweight, they're abusing alcohol, drug abuse, no social life, massive anxiety, can't leave the home, no hobbies. And you see results within, a couple microdoses and 1 macrodose, and you're at like an 80% remission. And I'm incredibly curious to see what happens in terms of how long do we get to have those effects? How much, how soon do we need to do the next treatment to maintain those effects? And we're just starting to get to know the right kind of therapy that goes in conjunction with these like psilocybin, as sort of the tool to help accelerate the therapy, the interaction there for the results that you're looking for. But you get people that all of a sudden they lose weight, they quit drinking, they are no longer suicidal, they're going to concerts, they're reading books, they're playing instruments, and And it's just beautiful to see the light in their face and like the relief that they're having from these medicines, these modalities that we're now it's less anecdotal, because for years there was like anecdotal research or results where people had stories to share, but the stories became so compelling that finally science became an advocate to say, okay, we're going to spend money on getting to know these results and see how we may be able to make this more accessible. And, when I was studying health psychology, neuroplasticity was a term in the sense of, can't teach an old dog new tricks. Once you're over 27, sorry guys, you don't have as much neuroplasticity and you're just not going to be able to learn as quickly. That is just the way your brain works, and that's the way it will always be. And you see in a lot of the data that's coming out of the psychedelic research is that no, that is not the case. In fact, if you look at scans when someone is under the influence of psilocybin, there is an incredible, symphony of neural pathways being developed, and neuroplasticity is now, being challenged in terms of how that can be. And what's great is now there's more data in mindfulness and meditation, and you can actually see some of those same results that you're seeing in the psychedelic space through some very specific, meditation practices that can emulate some of those same responses. And so, I love these breakthroughs that are happening in terms of challenging how we may have seen medicine before. I mean, one of them, the pain and the pain and mind experience. We did a lot of, here's how the pain loop is. This is why we make, these pharmaceutical medications, because we think this is what works with the pain loop. And what we're finding is we may have it completely wrong. We're giving these opioids that are pushing down the pain, and then the pain just keeps pushing back up. And the reality is we haven't found the right intersection there. And so another beautiful result of the psychedelic research that's coming out that will be able to impact longevity, improve people's happiness and well-being, and also get to understand these amazing bodies that we have.
You mentioned micro and macro dosing initially. So you've noticed, and it's been evidenced in the research, that you said a couple of macro doses. Can you tell us a little bit what a macro dose consists of? And then is micro dosing done in a clinic setting, or is that something that people do at home?
So there's a lot of different definitions of micro and macro. And it depends on the study in terms of if they say, a microdose is 100 milligrams and a macro dose is 500 milligrams. And I think that's going to be the interesting variation that we see as this becomes more formalized in terms of, okay, this person purchased, and very much like the cannabis space, right? Before cannabis was decriminalized, we didn't know what was out on the market. We couldn't tell if it was a 15% or 20%. And we're going to see the same thing on psilocybin, for example. And to answer your question, in this particular case, they're doing the psilocybin in a therapeutic controlled setting so that we can explore very specific results, like which therapy worked the most, which was it the smaller dose, the micro dose, or the bigger dose, the macro dose that impacted. Now, I think to answer your question and where it will go, I think that we are going to find that we can have macro doses in therapeutic settings, but I think micro doses are going to be a call it a nutraceutical, a vitamin, because it's such a small, subtle amount. And you've got other functional mushrooms that they work well with. So lion's mane or reishi mushroom, cordyceps. So I think you're going to see that there's going to be a place where microdosing is call it a brain vitamin that more people are going to access for improved health and wellness, and not necessarily a macro dose where they need like a massive, therapeutic shift in their life. I suspect. I mean, there's a lot of debates around where this will go.
Yes, it's a newer modality that's out there and available now.
Hmm.
And let's shift a little bit back to a concept you mentioned in the beginning, where we were looking at nutrition and having that as a central piece to any chronic illness recovery, or any health journey in general. But what is your thought on shifting from, well, there's different dietary mechanisms that are considered for dysautonomia, for instance. So people shift to a carnivore, or even just a ketogenic diet. There's plant-based diet, veganism. What are the types of diets that you recommend in general?
I typically won't recommend a diet because, to your point, everyone's body's a little bit different. What I recommend is going in and getting the blood work up, and the practitioner who's savvy enough to be able to say, okay, we did this workup. We have an idea of what food types are best for you. But I think it's an important part of engaging in the nutrition that you should have, because sometimes people are like, oh, I got the workup done and I found out like I shouldn't eat peanuts, like, and as soon as I got rid of eating peanuts in my life, like they didn't have an allergy to it, but it didn't work for their body. All of a sudden they no longer had asthma and they no longer had eczema. So unlocking the power to what works for your body, I think, is really important. Um, and nutrition can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, along with looking at it from a holistic perspective. Like I talked to my daughter about, of course I care about holistic skincare, but I also think that like our skin is our largest organ, and there's a lot more that our skin does for us that we have not uncovered. I think we're just at the beginning of understanding it, and now we're getting more biofeedback and biotouch in this, mind-body relationship. But we're also seeing like telomeres and telomere enzymes that are in our epidermis that help regenerate our longevity, and yet like it has an effect on our overall health and homeostasis and disease, but it's in our skin. So looking at nutritive resources from everything, you can, we call it food for your skin, but you can look at your ingredients and find those antioxidants, find those plants and those plant-based oils that are going to serve you well. And you'll find the ones that work for you the same way you're going to find, what foods you should or should not have. And sometimes it's healthy food that you shouldn't have. It just doesn't work for your body.
And I'm a fan of the MRT, the mediator release test, because that one has pinpointed, without having to do a challenge test, you don't want to eat gluten, for instance. You probably have had reactions, maybe not full-blown reaction, but for a lot of those food sensitivity tests, you have to challenge it, 2 or 3 weeks leading up to it. And the MRT is nice because you don't, it tests your whole blood in a lab. And when I ran it specifically, I found a lot of things on there. Sadly, caffeine was one, so I had to eliminate the coffee. And then something that I had been eating, I was on a GAPS diet, so I was making a lot of chicken broth, and so that one was flagged red for me. That was like one of the only ingredients that was flagged red, and it could be because of the frequency of me consuming it too. So, but that's another whole conversation. When it comes to the skin nutrition, there's so many things that we use daily, and like you mentioned, you have deodorants that you've created, so that's very helpful. Um, Women probably utilize, I don't know, somewhere around 50 different chemicals a day.
Wow.
Could be more than that, I'm not sure, but from the face lotions to anti-aging creams and even toothpaste, mouthwash, things like that have all kinds of toxins that we're not aware of. And as I'm into this functional health space, I'm learning even the traditionally prescribed use of fluoride in your toothpaste, the antiseptic properties in mouthwash, all of those can be detrimental to your microbiome, your oral microbiome and whatever. So can you,
So true. But
can you, go ahead.
so many things I want to unpack from that. I just had this conversation with my daughter this morning about fluoride. And, I discovered that on my own because I was breaking out on my face, and I just thought it was, all this different acne that acne. So I was doing your traditional acne solutions. And then I met with a practitioner and she said, do you have fluoride in your toothpaste? I'm like, well, yeah, of course I do. She's like, stop with the fluoride in your toothpaste and see what happens. And lo and behold, face cleared up, and my goodness, the amount of fluoride that people are exposed to in the water systems. I mean, it's extraordinary. And thankfully my skin told me it didn't work for me, but a lot of people, they have no idea that it's impacting them.
So that's one of the things that I think is key. And you mentioned it right there in our water supply. So another thing is people are drinking from plastic bottles and they think that that's the healthier alternative. They're also drinking, the refrigerator filtered water and thinking that's adequate, but it's really not. Do you have any recommendations along the lines of water consumption?
Get a well. No, I know that's not always great for everybody. I mean, anytime you cannot eat or drink from plastic, you should definitely take advantage of that. And it can be as simple as looking at when you're at a gas station, and thank goodness there's aluminum cans and glass jars now for water that there wasn't before, and that's great. There's a lot of, we'll call it biohacking techniques that you can use at home that can improve your water system. And it's just not always accessible to everyone. And so I don't know that I have a great solution in the general sense that's equitable. And so you bring an interesting point that that's something that someone needs to solve. Let's fix this, that everyone can have clean water and change that for our planet, because water is life and we continue to contaminate it. We contaminate it with the fluoride along with the things that we're eating and the things that we're putting on our body, all those chemicals you talked about that we're putting on our face and makeup and all that jazz. That goes into the water system when we shower and then goes into our food system. And that's really unfortunate. So, I think it's back to like choose wisely. For example, like when we developed our toothpaste, something as simple as and who'd have thought, instead of having fluoride, pure peppermint oil was one of the key ingredients, because it helps, it has natural calcium and magnesium in it. And we, for whatever reason, humans knew we needed peppermint in our toothpaste because peppermint is the most dominant flavor, but we've been using extracts or sweeteners to give it that. And actually, if you just had pure peppermint oil, you would be getting what you need, minus the fluoride. So what I love that you're doing is that you're providing a funnel of information for people to be empowered to know that those alternatives are there. Because oftentimes you just don't even know. It's the thing that you've been doing all the time and you never thought of doing it differently.
Right. And it's very key to really deep dive into those ingredients and the processing, even the containers. So all of those play an important role in what we should be bringing into our homes, especially, well, as a mother, I'm always thinking about my children, and the products that I'm looking for their use now are a lot what I call safer than some of the products that I used. I remember just even talking back to skincare, there was a lot of products that we used for acne, for dry skin, and none of the ingredients we could either pronounce or it did not resemble any form of like whole food ingredient.
Right.
And with your specific lines, I really want to, I'm going to provide links for everyone in the show notes because I think it's helpful for them to visualize what it is. If you could provide a little bit more on key ingredients that you like to see and that you like to use in your own products.
Oh my goodness. I love all the plants for the most part. It's so fun going into product development with my sister. And I mean, I think we read a study the other day that I think only about 20 or 30% of all the plants on the planet have been uncovered. And then they're disappearing at a rate of 50%, which is just wild. Some of my favorite plants. So calendula flowers essentially are in almost all of our products. And I'd say that that's a key one. It has antifungal, anti-yeast, antimicrobial properties. It's hydrating. It's an antioxidant. It is now known to be a plant stem cell and is shown to have a relationship with your telomeres and your DNA and your longevity, which is really exciting because it's always been a favorite plant of mine, but that's just some recent research that has come out. I also like how plants interact with each other. So I think that's really important. A good example of that is in our first aid formula, we have plantain and yarrow. And together they work to slow down the bleeding and improve healing. Separate, they have two different properties, but together they're like nature's band-aid. And I also think it's important from a sustainability standpoint, from a sourcing, like calendula, plantain, yarrow. A lot of these are just like considered weeds in nature. They don't need a whole lot of water. The more you harvest them, the more they grow. They're really tough plants. And so when my sister and I are doing product development, we take that into consideration as well, and being really mindful of what those ingredients are and where they come from. Chamomile and elderflowers, those are, fairly common when you hear about them in teas. But together they work beautifully with calendula for eczema. They really are harmonious and not only giving you this soothing feeling that you need, but really getting in there and giving you some nutritive properties that seem to really work well with why people get eczema flare-ups. And I could go on and on.
Yeah, so I know I have used some of those ingredients even in isolation, but I'm going to go into a little bit of my personal experience here. I had a biopsy done, and the wound eventually it wound up getting infected. And so I went the traditional route. They prescribed 3 different types of antibiotics with no improvement. And so then I started looking for herbal remedies, and there was like the suggestion from naturopathic doctor was pine tar oil. I used the plantain oil, which you mentioned,
Mhm.
and I think I
Yep.
had a lot more success with the plantain oil and tea tree oil than anything
Yep.
else. So that was fascinating, and hearing the antimicrobial properties there, it makes sense. So a lot
Yeah.
of people aren't aware that these plant-based and holistic
Mhm.
ointments that you prepare can go a long way. And like you mentioned, it speeds up the recovery, probably minimizes
Mhm.
appearance of scars and things like that. What can a person expect in terms of, let's say they have an open wound? Can you give us a little bit of a time frame for open wounds versus maybe a chronic skin condition that there's some scarring involved?
Two things. I want to come back to, and I'm going to add lavender oil on wound care. And the reason I want to come back to that ingredient is that it really kind of dovetails to what you were saying in the sense of sometimes we think of these plants not having the power that they have. Lavender is a perfect example. When you think of lavender, people just think of it smells good. We just use lavender because it smells good. Lavender is phenomenal for wound care. Literally, take pure lavender oil and put it on a wound, and it's like boom, just like that, which is pretty great. So, that being said, thinking about a wound care versus chronic skin condition. So, our first aid formula is the ideal formula for wound care. And I will tell you, because of it's the beautiful blend of herbs and how quickly it works, if you're someone who has had surgery recently and you have multiple layers of the skin that have been a part of that surgery, I would not recommend the first aid formula right out of the gate because it will heal so quickly on the surface. You have other layers that need to start healing first. So it's important to let the wound heal from the inside out, and then you can start adding, something that's more aggressive on the outside. Um, and then for chronic skin conditions, if you have like eczema or psoriasis or chronic dry skin, that's where you want to use your what we call the dry skin formula. Because we're using so many herbs, our naming convention, we decided to name it for what it is to make it really easy for people. So our first aid is our first aid. Our dry skin is for dry skin. Our repairs for repairing. And that's one that you can use, when you've got the multiple layers that you're working with. I will say that our repair formula is by far my most favorite from an anti-aging standpoint. It was designed for burns and scars. Um, But what we found is that it just has beautiful anti-aging components as well. And so, I mean, I put this on my face every night before I go to bed, and it's just, I live in Colorado. There's no hydration here.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty magical.
You mentioned the hydration and being able to use it daily. That was another one of my questions. Is there a limitation as to, consistent use, or is it okay to use on a daily basis?
Oh yes, definitely use on a daily basis. Is your skin when you start using these products, it kind of goes against, I talk about this a lot, it kind of goes against traditional capitalism because eventually the less you need them because your skin is so happy and so healthy and so hydrated. But you still want to use it to continue to nurture and cultivate it. And different regions, if there's more hydration in the air, perhaps I don't have to use the repair, twice a day. But in Colorado, hands down, it is twice a day,
Mhm.
which is lovely. But these things you can use as much as you need or want. I will tell you, I've had a lot of men who use our repair, and I just use it. Just put it on your nightstand, put it on your face before you go to bed, and just see what happens. And they're like, my mom complimented me on my skin. I've never had anyone compliment me on my skin. So it's really low maintenance care as well, which is really fun. And if you've never used an oil face wash before, I highly encourage it because traditional face washes, like they have a lot of drying agents. So you like clean your face and then it's so dry and then you're counteracting it with something else. And the oil face wash pulls the dirt out of the pores, takes your makeup off, does what it's supposed to do, but doesn't take the hydration and the nutrients out of your skin. And it's really fun. You'll find that like when you like brush your face on the towel, you're like, ooh, I got a lot off.
That's something a lot of our listeners probably don't associate with oil being clean, but yes, it's not the oil that would clog our pores.
Right. Exactly.
So if you had advice for our listeners who are more curious about these alternative paths to well-being, where would you direct them?
Greengoo.com. If you go to greengoo.com, you can access all of the various brands, our sexual wellness brand and so forth. And we do have a new page coming soon, that's called The Things We Love. And that will be other brands that we just really love and want to support to continue to serve our customers in this holistic skincare um, world. And so we can really bring more nutrition and health and wellness to them.
We appreciate that. So we'll include those links again in the show notes. Definitely enjoyed learning about these products and just the actual properties in them that will assist us in what I call our wellness journeys now. I'm trying to get away from our chronic illness journey to wellness journey. So we appreciate all of the information you provided. I know after this talk, I'm going to go into your website and make sure I pick up a lot of those products because everything that you mentioned is something that I know someone in my household, including myself, would be able to benefit from.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. And I enjoyed being a part of your wellness journey and how we may be able to contribute to more having a positive wellness journey.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jodi. Again, we appreciate it. And thank you to all of our listeners.